happy time. I get to talk about a good book for once. Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about a new book that I read. Well, it's not new, it actually came out about 20 years ago. It is one of the books I read in April, and I wanted to give it its own video because I love and respect it to death. It's in my top 5 favorite books ever written now because I've read through it about 1.5 times. I'm going to read it again before the end of the year, but I fucking absolutely loved it, and I'm frothing to talk about it. And that book we're going to talk about is W.G. Sebald's Austerlitz. You have to say it in a very commanding tone when you say the title. You have to go, Austerlitz. W.G. Sebald was a German writer who absolutely would have won the Nobel Prize if he hadn't died in a car crash in his 50s. And he died in 2001, which was the same year this book was released to kind of the international market. And it was quickly viewed as a masterpiece and a landmark, and I read the book, and it is both of those things. This book is about an unnamed narrator, and he is walking around European cities, and for whatever reason, he keeps bumping into the same man, that being Jacques Austerlitz. And Jacques Austerlitz is a man who is trying to unravel the mystery surrounding his birth and what happened to his parents after he was left on a Kindertransport and raised by foster parents. And while the book is about those things that I mentioned about this character Austerlitz discovering things about his parents and his past, the book is also about this narrator as he views things and sort of interprets and takes in the cities that he's in and the kind of progression to modernity that happened in Europe after World War II. This book feels like a new genre, and there was this really magical moment that happened for me about 1/3 of the way through the book where I just went, oh, this is what the book is. This is just what it is or what it's going to become. And it is incredibly dreamlike and magical and unlike anything I've ever read. This narrator keeps bumping into this Austerlitz character in these European cities that feel like ghost towns, and they talk to each other and have these very smooth, flowing conversations with each other that kind of bleed into each other, and it creates this really interesting hypnotic effect. The book is about the European experience during and after World War II, particularly a shift towards modern cities and modern times. But the way the book shows that through these contrasting perspectives and through the interests of the two main characters was really interesting and quite powerful. The two main characters have an interest in architecture, so we hear a lot about the architecture of these cities and about these famous buildings that they walk past. The use of architecture as a motif in this book is very striking, and it gives this sort of primal emotive feeling to what's being talked about that you wouldn't necessarily think about when you're reading it. It's like when you see architecture as a motif, you don't necessarily think that it will create the effect that it does. Austerlitz at one point says he tries to keep himself out of the events of time, and the book kind of follows a certain structure that kind of billows out and flows out from that, and when Austerlitz is talking about World War II and he's kind of hinting at things like the Holocaust, he's not looking directly at it, so the reader doesn't look directly at it. It's not what he's talking about. There's so much subtext in this book and so much sort of interior detail. So at the end, the book, when it kind of concludes, forms this perfect, really rather sad and rather ghostly metaphor for Europe in the 20th century. Everything that Austerlitz says is shaded, and everything is kind of hidden from itself, and they'll distract themselves by talking about other things, and it's so fascinating to read, and it's very, very sad. Ultimately, while I've said the book is about Europe and World War II, the book primarily is about history itself, and how we conjure up history, and how it comes out of us, and what it looks like, and the effect it has on ourselves, as well as the people around us. And it's this really sad, beautiful structure that we have in the book following Austerlitz, discovering his personal history, accompanied with this narrator who is thinking about architecture and viewing the cities when Austerlitz is absent. It's about structure, it's about interpretation of the world, literally everything. It's about everything. As I mentioned, the book is made up of these long sentences that flow really well. Apparently in this book, there's a sentence that goes on for 9 pages straight, and I went searching for it when I was flicking through the book and I couldn't find it because the book does flow that well, and it's just so not in your mind when you're reading it because it is just so fucking well written. But the book's craziest choice is that it has pictures in it. Black and white pictures of just whatever comes to the author and the reader's fancy. There'll be pictures of sort of empty halls or pictures of maps or pictures of people, sometimes pictures of artworks. And the choice of that was really jarring at first. There's a couple of pictures near the beginning that I think don't entirely work, and that's literally my only criticism with the book. But some of the pictures later on really give this strange contrasting effect when you're seeing just people's faces and it's just kind of not, like, it's not relevant to the passage that you've just read, but it's a person's face, and you know kind of internally in sort of like an emotive sense what that picture references at that point in time. It's very, very odd, but it's such a unique decision to have pictures all throughout this book, and it really adds to it. I believe the pictures are just whatever took Sebald's fantasy. There's no specific relevance. But he gives them relevance, and it's kind of this weird metaphor about photographs and what photographs are, which are just sort of dead imprints of history. And again, because the book is about bringing that to life and the shape that that takes, putting pictures in throughout that is a very interesting sort of, I guess, sort of contextualizing of that metaphor. You have this feeling all throughout the book of what is being kept hidden, the kind of elephant in the room, and the way that bleeds out in the back half of the book. More specifically with where we leave Austerlitz as a character, like the point that the book ends with him on, and when he leaves for good, that's like a really powerful moment. And you know all throughout the book, well, everything in this has to lead up to the Holocaust, right? You know that it has to be about this big elephant in the room and the word that kind of sounds like Austerlitz, which is mentioned in the introduction to the book. Like, what does Austerlitz sound like as a word when reference to the Holocaust? You know it kind of has to lead to a point like that. But the book kind of doesn't hit that point. It sort of does, but the point that you're left with Austerlitz as a character, you know he's going off to find perhaps some final sort of moment where he understands it all and he has that moment of resolution. But you don't necessarily know that he's going to get that. And when he leaves, it feels like that journey is just going to continue until eventually he wears himself out or he finds out something new. But what he's told the narrator is the point. What the narrator has heard and how he's thought about it is what matters in the book. And it's so powerful and it's so crazy, and it's really interesting to think about the book once it finishes and to go back and read through it and understand that if that's the end point of the book, how does the rest of the book kind of fit into that? It feels unresolved in the best possible way, and I would recommend reading James Wood's introduction to this book from the special 10th anniversary edition. Because the introduction tells you what the book is about, and sometimes once you finish a book you do want to know that, and with this book I did. So when I read that introduction and I understood what the book was after reading that in like a plot sense, I loved it even more, and it really helped ground me in terms of what I thought about the book. It helps you with interpretation a lot, which can be something that people want, including myself. There are so many memorable moments. There's all these countless moments when the narrator explores an old tower. There's a long bit about moths. There's a bit where they discover a farm that has abandoned like potato sacks in it, and then the farmer comes in and tells his story. There's a bit near the end where one of the characters goes into a museum of veterinary science, and that moment was so disturbing that I remember it almost word for word. It's just burned onto my brain. It never lets up being like that, this book. Just this series of incredible, emotive, mysterious moments that just wash over you and that just flow from one to another without any sense of friction at all. It's so well written and easy to understand and unpretentious that searching for the subtext and letting the whole book flow over you is something that you want to do, and it's something that you feel rewarded in doing. It's dense in meaning, but never dense in format or plotting. It's not like Ulysses or something. It's honestly the perfect counterweight to Ulysses. There's no feeling while you're reading it that you're confused. There's no feeling that you're being left behind like Ulysses gives you. This book is like the perfect dense counterweight to that, where you feel like you've touched the surface of the book, but that was rewarding in itself. I love this book. It's amazing. It made me tear up near the end. Pretty much any dick-sucking anecdote I can give towards this book is something that I would give towards it. If you've ever found yourself agreeing with my taste in any book that I've ever mentioned, I would really recommend adding this to your TBR. It's It's just a masterpiece. I love it so much, and I will read it again before the end of the year. It's emotional, and I wouldn't say it's for the faint of heart in terms of what it's talking about, but while you're reading it, you feel like you've got your finger on, like, the beating pulse of history. It's an incredible feeling, and it's an incredible book. So I'd really recommend checking it out. That is W.G. Sebald's Austerlitz. Bing, 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 bing. Thank you all for watching. We'll get back to more international literature when I talk more about the International Booker books. I'll have reviews coming in the next couple of weeks, just before they announce the winner. And I hope you enjoyed the video and that sort of piqued your curiosity in any way. So thank you all so much. Bye!